Hello, this is Dave Hurwitz, Executive Editor at ClassicsToday.com, here to talk about the best recordings of Rimsky-Korsakov's Sheherazade. Now, Sheherazade isn't as popular as it used to be. There was a time when every major conductor worth their salt made a recording of Sheherazade. Now, at least on disc, they're coming few and far between. It's really kind of astonishing. And there's a tendency to take Rimsky-Korsakov for granted because his actual symphonies are not his strongest works. I mean, let's not kid ourselves. So Sheherazade is regarded as kind of a symphonie manquée, as they say in French. You know, it's symphonic, but it's not really serious because it's not like German, because it isn't like Bruckner. You know what I mean? It's annoying because Sheherazade is a great piece. I remember I had a very interesting conversation once with Henri-Louis de Lagrange, you know, the Mahler biographer. And when he was in New York, we used to get together. And he wrote in his biography, you know, about Mahler in New York that, you know, he made this sort of swipe at Rimsky-Korsakov because Mahler programmed Sheherazade. And he said, well, one can only think about what Mahler must have thought about that work, you know. And I said to him, Henry, Mahler would have loved it. He would have loved it for its orchestral brilliance, its craftsmanship, its wonderful tunes. I mean, that's why Mahler loved España. I mean, Mahler called Chabrier's España the birth of modern orchestration. He played it all the time. You know, we have to be careful about how we judge these things, I think. I mean, Sheherazade is a masterpiece, period. And whether it has development or simply repetition, who cares? Whatever it does perfectly. And that's the point, isn't it? But in talking about recordings of Sheherazade, we're going to have a lot of older ones, like I said, because that's where they are. Those are the ones that exist. And some conductors did their absolute best work in Sheherazade. So we have to include them. I have a stack here of about 14 recordings we're going to talk about, at least, because Sheherazade is the work that really tests the mettle of a virtuoso orchestra and a virtuoso conductor who has to exercise the right kind of control over his orchestra while still giving his first desk players, especially those woodwinds, an opportunity to really strut their stuff and play with the necessary freedom and expressivity. It's an absolute clinic on what a great orchestra with a great conductor should be able to do. And with that, I want to get right to the recordings, and I want to talk about the great elephant in the room, and that's Beecham. I'm not a big fan of Beecham's Sheherazade. Now, for years and years and years, I grew up reading Gramophone, having British critics tell me it was the ne plus ultra of Sheherazade because the bassoonist was Reginald Thistleflump, and Thistleflump was the greatest bassoonist who ever played the solo in the second movement. And they talked about all these people like they were personal friends, and they just couldn't stop yakking about how wonderful it all was. Well, here's the bottom line on the Beecham Sheherazade. The woodwind solos are beautiful. They are. They're not better than a million other woodwind solos you hear in other Scheherazades with other great orchestras. The third movement is a bit slow. It really is. It hangs fire. The finale is unexciting and not terribly well played by the brass. And frankly, the sonics are subpar. There's no bass. It has no bass. I mean, who wants to hear a shipwreck where the bass drum is thundering along? I know, I've played the bass drum. And yet you don't hear it. It's just not there. It's a real problem. So for me, although I admire its stylishness, and you know, Beecham always brings something wonderful to the program, and he does in this piece. There's no question about it. But it's still not a great Sheherazade. If you're playing the game of comparisons, which is what we're doing, it isn't. So I'm going to go through a lot of Scheherazades, not necessarily in my orders of preference until we get to the last ones, and then I'll tell you what I think the really special ones are. But some of these are just marvelous for a whole host of reasons. And I mean, you know, you're gonna have to choose. You're gonna have to take your pick. First, I want to talk about Lauren Moselle with the Cleveland Orchestra. This is a spectacular disc from a purely technical point of view. Moselle was something of a cold fish, as you know. He was one of the great podium technicians, and the Cleveland Orchestra is one of the most precise and fabulously virtuosic orchestras that ever existed. And for that reason alone, this is worth hearing. You get a terrific Sheherazade, you get the Russian Easter Overture, which is also very well done, and the Capriccioso Espagnol. I mean, what could possibly be bad? It's a very well-filled disc. This is a Japanese Decca, by the way, that has all this stuff on it. And like I said, it isn't the most warm and snuggly Sheherazade you'll ever hear. But boy, oh boy, do they play. And this is one of those pieces, quite frankly, that's part of it. You know, there are other pieces like Bruckner, where, you know, spirituality or the perception of spirituality matters more than technical proficiency, but not Sheherazade. Let's not kid ourselves. And let's not denigrate the piece, because that's an important element. It's simply part of and parcel of the work. Next, this one may surprise you. Remember this one? This is Heitink with the London Philharmonic. Now, this also got a lot of praise in the British press, and I think rightly so. You know, Heitink made some gorgeous recordings with the London Philharmonic. Not his Beethoven cycle, but Sheherazade. Remember the planets with its sort of slowish tempos? But this is one of those pieces where Heitink could get behind a work that was, you know, where he could bring all of his natural sensitivity and musicality to bear in creating a really effortless sense of flow and beautiful balances and just a terrific give and take between the conductor and the orchestra. And this is one of those performances. It's absolutely beautiful performance. And it was really the Sheherazade of choice on Phillips before Kondrashin came along with the Concertgebouw. And then everyone forgot about it. It's very interesting, because I used to see it mentioned all the time, but then when Kondrashins came out, it was like, but that's not fair. I mean, the piece has absolute musical excellence, and it needs to be recognized for what it is. And speaking of Kondrashin, here he is with the all-time greatest, you know, Russian Easter Overture conducted by Markevich, and the Capriccioso Espagnol too. This Sheherazade is only missing a tam-tam at the big crash when the ship wrecks. It is just so beautiful. I mean, you got the Concertgebouw playing like gods, and Kondrashin, who knows the work as well as any human being possibly could. It is totally, absolutely gorgeous. You know, Russian performances of doing very sensual recordings of Sheherazade. You know, I mean, excuse me, that was the cat. Svetlanov's was just a schmooze fest. Rostropovich, you know, and this is sort of in that tradition in the sense that it's very warm, very romantic, very lush in the third movement, but Kondrashin has also the energy and the rhythm and the sharpness and the dynamism and the unwillingness to let the whole thing just bog down and sink like the ship in the fourth movement. And so it's one of the reference recordings of Sheherazade, certainly one of the modern references. If only it had the tam-tam. Next, Robert Spano with the Atlanta Symphony on Telarc, also with the Russian Easter Overture. And a very good one, by the way, where you actually hear the tam-tam, but the trombones at the end are really beautiful. It has a wonderful Russian soul to the playing when the chant melody comes in. It's just great. But this Sheherazade is brilliant. Again, it's a little bit like Moselle's. It's brilliantly played. It has more ideas. Spano gives himself the opportunity to try and make something out of the music at times, which really is very, very nice. Now, Telarc has another excellent Sheherazade with Charles Mackerras. The thing about the Mackerras recording, which has all of his typical excitement and musicality and rhythm, it's with the London Symphony, is that it was not that well recorded. You know, back in the day, remember, we expected Telarc to be spectacular. It's good, don't get me wrong, but it just doesn't have that extra sonic glamour that you kind of expected from Telarc recordings. Fine as that performance is, and it's fine, and I have it, and I love it. But I like listening to this one purely sonically, engineering-wise, a little bit more. It's a beautifully, beautifully made recording. It really is. And it does the work full justice. But now we're going to take a step back a little bit to some older ones. And here's one that you really probably haven't seen in a while, if ever at all, in the history of humanity. Zdenek Galabala and the Czech Philharmonic. This is from the mid-50s. It's in mono, in excellent mono, along with a really fabulous Night on Bald Mountain. This is a 2-disc set of Galabala, and it's coupled with Cacciatore and Gaina excerpts, which, are very well done. 52 minutes of Gaina is about as much as anyone needs. Not as well recorded. But this Sheherazade is the one to hear if you want to hear the Czech Philharmonic really strutting its stuff. Galabala was basically an opera conductor. He was best known for his wonderful, wonderful recording of The Bartered Bride. And this is a theatrical performance. It's exciting, it's dramatic, it's well balanced, it's stunningly played. And if you're not averse to mono sound and you want to hear that orchestra sounding like no one else, with those woodwinds and those lean strings and the trumpets with lots of vibrato, and this is something you got to hear if you can find it. It's amazing. It's just amazing. Zdenek Galabala with the Czech Philharmonic. I'm not kidding. However, a little bit more normal, maybe easier to find. Antal Doradi. Remember this one? This is with the Minneapolis Symphony with Raphael Druian, who was the concertmaster back then in Minneapolis. This is also an excellent, excellent Sheherazade. I mean, I look at this thing and I just think, wow. I mean, it's just wonderful. It's beautiful. It's quick. That's really nice. First movement's under 9 minutes. The Young Prince and the Young Princess is just a bit over 10. The last movement is just a bit over 10. These things routinely run to 12 minutes, 13 minutes, 11 minutes. This is just a sizzling hot Sheherazade, and it's recorded in vintage Mercury Living Present sound. If you want excitement, lots of excitement, then Doradi is your man. However, let's not forget Rudolf Kempa. Now, Kempa, of course, was, as I keep saying, the master colorist in the history of 20th century conducting, and he's got the Berlin Philharmonic. Now, I know Karajan recorded Sheherazade. Bleh, who cares? This, if you want the Berlin Phil, Kempa's your guy. You won't hear a more colorful, sensitively performed, sizzlingly interpreted Sheherazade than this one. No one ever paid attention to it, like so much Kempa did. It's like the German conductor, the Russian music. Karajan only got away with it because he was Karajan. Let me tell you, Kempa was superb in anything that required an emphasis on vertical harmony, texture, color, and not counterpoint. And no one will ever say that Sheherazade relies on counterpoint for anything. So Kempa is wonderfully worth hearing. This is also in the EMI, the Warner Icon Kempa box. So if you have the Kempa box, you have the Sheherazade. This is the other one. This is the Testament box before EMI started making icon boxes. But it's beautiful. Also wonderful and very personal and very special. Silvestri. This is in the Silvestri icon box with Bournemouth, with his own orchestra. It wasn't the greatest orchestra in the world, although they played like the greatest orchestra in the world as often as not when Silvestri was before them. And like everything he did, the music he was sort of the Sándor Végh of non-Germanic repertoire, Silvestri. It has that same vocal sort of alive feeling of passion and emotion and intensity behind everything. Everything he did had that. The phrases breathe. The flow of the music is organic. It's such a beautiful performance to hear, just for the shaping of how the work can go. I really wish. I just wonder what like modern conductors today do. They need to be like tied to a chair and made to listen to these performances and recordings, because, they play these things like they'll play Sheherazade with contempt, like it's just a composition exercise. Silvestri plays it like it's the greatest piece of music ever written, and it needs as much care and attention as Beethoven's Ninth. And that's the way this stuff needs to be played, always, without exception. Right? You agree with me, I hope? All right, now let's talk about three. I think I've got at least three here. Yes, this is like the Sheherazade eloquence collection, because they're all on eloquence. And there's a fourth. They actually, for a while, I think they issued Zubin Mehta's too, with LA. But these are the three older eloquence recordings, and they're all fabulous in their way. I mean, they really are. So we need to get through them. One is Pierre Monteux with the LSO. Now, the problem with this one is the coupling. It's the Russian Easter Overture with the London Phil and Adrian Bolt. Ugh, what a mess that is. I mean, just forget it. But for Sheherazade, this was Monteux, vintage Monteux. Same time he did the Daphnis and Chloe in London, and the Dvorak 7, and the Sibelius 2, and Sheherazade. It was one of his signature pieces, and this is the recording of his Deget, all things considered. The LSO was not in the best shape in the early 60s, but they rise to the occasion here for Monteux, and it's just a beautiful, it's a French performance. Elegant, pointed, crisp, not too sticky. It's just great. Also just great, with the same orchestra, actually playing a bit better, Igor Markevich, with also the most exciting Capriccio Espagnol in the history of Capriccio Espagnols. This is just amazing. And it's absolutely first rate, and I just love it. I mean, this is the first release on Decca. Well, I mean, because it was originally on Philips. One of the all-time great Sheherazades. Markevich was wonderful in Russian music. Remember, he did all the Tchaikovsky symphonies at the same time with the LSO, and it's one of the reference sets. He also was wonderful with Rimsky-Korsakov. He recorded some of the opera suites with the Lamoureux Orchestra for Deutsche Grammophon. I mean, you just can't go wrong with anything this guy did in this repertoire. He had the technique, he had the dazzle, but he also had the heart, and he really whips up a storm at the end. It's just great. Absolutely great. However, this is not the big however. This is the little however. For the eloquence batch, the one that you really need to hear is Ansermet. And this is not Ansermet with the Suisse Romande. He made a very, very good version with the Suisse Romande for Decca, but this is the earlier one with the Paris Conservatory Orchestra. The Paris Conservatoire, that fabulous, fabulous French orchestra with the incomparable performance tradition going back to Beethoven's day, and the incomparable experience in French music and also Russian music, which is really sort of gussied up French music in the 19th century. Just ask Tchaikovsky. And this is a stunning performance, and it comes with the Coq d'Or suite, the one with the Suisse Romande Orchestra. But you absolutely, positively have to hear the Paris Conservatory Orchestra in its prime, in stereo, playing this. I love this. I just pet it. It's wonderful. It's absolutely, absolutely wonderful. You've got Ansermet at his best, French orchestra at his best, and it's magical. It's absolutely magical. It is a fairy tale, literally, and it's what it sounds like. And it doesn't sound like any other performance in the discography, I assure you. So now we come down to the final two. This one is sui generis, and we cannot talk about Scheherazades without mentioning Stkowski. He did this a bunch of times. There are earlier ones. There's one after this. This is the Decca Phase 4 one. It's the only one to hear. His later one with RCA, that it's in the RCA Stkowski box, not as well recorded, not as powerfully interpreted, but this sucker, this is the London Symphony. Holy mackerel. This is Stkowski giving it the full treatment. You've got extra harps. You've got a xylophone in the second movement. You've got the tam-tam going wherever Rimsky-Korsakov didn't ask for it in the finale, and you have that phase 4 recording with a microphone down the throat of every single instrument, and Stkowski at the controls fiddling the knobs and doing everything phase 4 was invented to do, which is create a completely, totally, absolutely artificial sound experience, custom tailored to this particular work, with the violin sounding so decadent, so sumptuous. It's I mean, you know, you'll need to have, like, you know, take your cholesterol medication after this. That's what it's a coronary arrest on a plate. You know what I mean? It's so rich, and it's fantastic. It is not Rimsky-Korsakov's Sheherazade in a way. It's the Rimsky-Korsakov / Stkowski Sheherazade. But my, oh my, oh my, oh my, right? You got to hear it. It's one of the classics. So that's that one. However, and this is the big however, if I only had to have one Sheherazade, if I need one where everything comes together, it's so clean, so beautiful, so transparent, just fantastic in every respect. It's held up since the day it was issued, and it's Reiner on Living Stereo with Chicago. You know, he did a bunch of those living stereos that were just amazing. There was La Mer, there was Stravinsky's The Song of the Nightingale, there was the Respighi tone poems, there was just, you know, they were just amazing. They set a totally new standard for orchestral execution in this repertoire. You know, you had Zella and Cleveland to do the German stuff, but for everything else, including Strauss too, Reiner was your guy. I mean, the orchestra is playing as if their lives depended on it. Their performance has such precision allied to just the joy of the music, you know, just as that virtuoso delight in showing off what they can do and expressing just the wonderful, wonderful fairy tale character of the melodies. It never bogs down. It never stops or flags anywhere. Not in the second movement, which can get a little repetitious. Not in the third movement, which can go to sleep on you. And the final shipwreck is just cataclysmically fabulous. I know there are many, many Scheherazades, and we've talked about a lot of them here. But if you're going to get one to start your Scheherazade collection, but of course you all have that already, but you got to have Reiner's. You just got to have it, got to hear it. And all the others, I wouldn't call them second best. I mean, you can't. There's too much great music making here. There really is. But the Reiner Scheherazade is special. I love it. I love it. I love it. And so will you. In addition to the other 10 or 12 or 13 or 14 or 15 you've probably already got or soon will be acquiring. So thank you. If you enjoyed this chat, please subscribe to my YouTube channel, and keep on listening. Sheherazade never grows old.